This is James and the Giant Peach, Part 8. Chapter 18. A minute later they were out in the open, standing on the very top of the peach near the stem, blinking their eyes in the strong sunlight and peering nervously around. "What happened? Where are we? But this is impossible! Unbelievable! Terrible! I told you we were bobbing up and down," the ladybird said. "We're in the middle of the sea," cried James, and indeed they were. A strong current and a high wind had carried the peach so quickly away from the shore that already the land was out of sight. All around them lay a vast black ocean, deep and hungry. Little waves were bibbling against the sides of the peach. "But how did it happen?" they cried. "Where are the fields? Where are the woods? Where is England?" Nobody, not even James, could understand how in the world a thing like this could have come about. "Ladies and gentlemen," the old green grasshopper said, trying very hard to keep the fear and disappointment out of his voice, "I'm afraid we find ourselves in a rather awkward situation." "Awkward?" cried the earthworm. "My dear old grasshopper, we are finished! Every one of us is about to perish. I may be blind, you know, but that much I can see quite clearly." "Off with my boots!" shouted the centipede. "I cannot swim with my boots on." "I can't swim at all," cried the ladybird. "Nor can I," wailed the glowworm. "Nor I," said Miss Spider. "None of us three girls can swim a single stroke." "But you won't have to swim," said James calmly. "We are floating beautifully, and sooner or later a ship is bound to come along and pick us up." They all stared at him in amazement. "Are you quite sure that we're not sinking?" the ladybird asked. "Of course I am," answered James. "Go and look for yourselves." They all ran over to the side of the peach and peered down at the water below. "The boy's quite right," the old green grasshopper said. "We are floating beautifully. Now we must all sit down and keep perfectly calm. Everything will be all right in the end." "What absolute nonsense!" cried the earthworm. "Nothing is ever all right in the end, and well you know it." "Poor earthworm," the ladybird said, whispering in James's ear. "He loves to make everything into a disaster. He hates to be happy. He is only happy when he is gloomy. Now isn't that odd? But then I suppose just being an earthworm is enough to make a person pretty gloomy. Don't you agree?" "If this peach is not going to sink," the earthworm was saying, "and if we are not going to be drowned, then every one of us is going to starve to death instead. Do you realise that we haven't had a thing to eat since yesterday morning?" "By golly, he's right," cried the centipede. "For once, earthworm is right." "Of course I'm right," the earthworm said, "and we're not likely to find anything around here either. We shall get thinner and thinner and thinner, and thirstier, and we shall all die a slow and grisly death from starvation. I'm dying already. I'm shrivelling up for want of food. Personally, I would rather drown." "But good heavens, you must be blind," said James. "You know very well I'm blind," snapped the earthworm. "There's no need to rub it in." "I didn't mean that," said James quickly. "I'm sorry, but can't you see that—" "See?" shouted the poor earthworm. "How can I see if I'm blind?" James took a deep, slow breath. "Can't you realise," he said patiently, "that we have enough food here to last us for weeks and weeks?" "Where?" they said. "Where?" "Why, the peach, of course. Our whole ship is made of food." "Jumping Jehoshaphat!" they cried. "We never thought of that." "My dear James," said the old green grasshopper, laying a front leg affectionately on James's shoulder, "I don't know what we'd do without you. You're so clever. Ladies and gentlemen, we are saved again." "We most certainly are not," said the earthworm. "You must be crazy. You can't eat the ship. It's the only thing that is keeping us up." "We shall starve if we don't," said the centipede. "And we shall drown if we do," cried the earthworm. "Dear, oh dear," said the old green grasshopper. "Now we're worse off than before." "Couldn't we just eat a little bit of it?" asked Mr. Spider. "I am so dreadfully hungry." "You can eat all you want," James answered. It would take us weeks and weeks to make any sort of dent in this enormous peach. Surely you can see that." "Good heavens, he's right again," cried the old green grasshopper, clapping his hands. "It would take weeks and weeks, of course it would. but let's not go making a lot of holes all over the deck. I think we'd better simply scoop it out of that tunnel over there, the one that we've just come up by." "An excellent idea," said the ladybird. "What are you looking so worried about, Earthworm?" the centipede asked. "What's the problem?" "The problem is," the Earthworm said, the problem is that there is no problem." Everyone burst out laughing. "Cheer up, Earthworm," they said. "Come and eat." And they all went over to the tunnel entrance and began scooping out great chunks of juicy golden-coloured peach flesh. "Oh, marvellous," said the centipede, stuffing it into his mouth. "Delicious," said the old green grasshopper. "Just fabulous," said the Earthworm. "Oh my," said the ladybird primly, "what a heavenly taste." She looked up at James and she smiled, and James smiled back at her. They sat down on the deck together, both of them chewing away happily. "You know, James," the ladybird said, "up until this moment I've never in my life tasted anything except those tiny little green flies that live on rose bushes. They have a perfectly delightful flavour, but this peach is even better." "Isn't it glorious?" Miss Spider said, coming over to join them. "Personally, I had always thought that a big, juicy, caught-in-the-web blue bottle was the finest dinner in the world, until I tasted this." "What a flavour!" the centipede cried. "It's terrific! There's nothing like it, and there never has been, and I should know because I have personally tasted all the finest foods in the world." Whereupon the centipede, with his mouth full of peach, and with juice running down all over his chin, suddenly burst into song. "I've eaten many strange and scrumptious dishes in my time, like jellied gnats and dandy-prats and earwigs cooked in slime, and mice with rice, they're really nice when roasted in their prime, but don't forget to sprinkle them with just a pinch of grime. I've eaten fresh mud burgers by the greatest cooks there are, and scrambled dregs and stink bugs' eggs and hornets stewed in tar, and pails of snails and lizards' tails and beetles by the jar. A beetle is improved by just a splash of vinegar. I often eat boiled slobadges, they're grand when served beside minced doodlebugs and curried slugs. And have you ever tried mosquitoes' toes and wampfish roes, most delicately fried? The only trouble is they disagree with my inside. I'm mad for crispy wasp stings on a piece of buttered toast, and pickled spines of porcupines, and then a gorgeous roast of dragon's flesh, well, hung, not fresh. It costs £1 at most, and comes to you in barrels if you order it by post. I crave the tasty tentacles of octopi for tea. I like hot dogs. I love hot frogs, and surely you'll agree, a plate of soil with engine oils, a super recipe. I hardly need to mention that it's practically free. For dinner on my birthday, shall I tell you what I chose? Hot noodles made from poodles on a slice of garden hose, and a rather smelly jelly made of armadillo's toes. The jelly is delicious, but you have to hold your nose. Now comes, the centipede declared, the burden of my speech. These foods are rare beyond compare, some are right out of reach, but there's no doubt I'd go without 1,000,000 plates of each for one small bite, one tiny bite of this fantastic peach. Everybody was feeling happy now. The sun was shining brightly out of a soft blue sky, and the day was calm. The giant peach, with the sunlight glinting on its side, was like a massive golden ball sailing on the silver sea. Chapter 19. "Look," cried the centipede just as they were finishing their meal. "Look at that funny thin black thing gliding through the water over there." They all swung round to look. "There are 2 of them," said Miss Spider. "There are lots of them," said the ladybird. "What are they?" asked the earthworm, getting worried. "They must be some kind of fish," said the old green grasshopper. "Perhaps they've come along to say hello." "They are sharks," cried the earthworm. "I bet you anything you like that they are sharks, and they've come along to eat us up." "What absolute rot," the cat centipede said. But his voice seemed suddenly to become a little bit shaky, and he wasn't laughing. "I'm positive they're sharks," said the earthworm. "I just know they are sharks." And so, in actual fact, did everyone else, but they were too frightened to admit it. There was a short silence. They all peered down anxiously at the sharks, who were cruising slowly round and round the peach. "Just assuming that they are sharks," the centipede said, "there still can't possibly be any danger if we stay up here." But even as he spoke, one of those thin black fins suddenly changed direction and came cutting swiftly through the water right up to the side of the peach itself. The shark paused and stared up at the company with small evil eyes. "Go away!" they shouted. "Go away, you filthy beast!" Slowly, almost lazily, the shark opened its mouth, which was big enough to have swallowed a perambulator, and made a lunge at the peach. They all watched aghast. And now, as though at a signal from the leader, all the other sharks came swimming in towards the peach, and they clustered around it and began to attack it furiously. There must have been 20 or 30 of them at least, all pushing and fighting and lashing their tails and churning the water into a froth. Panic and pandemonium broke out immediately on top of the peach. "Oh, we're finished now," cried Miss Spider, wringing her feet. "They will eat up the whole peach, and then there'll be nothing left for us to stand on, and then they'll start on us." "She's right," shouted the ladybird. "We're lost forever." "Oh, I don't want to be eaten," wailed the earthworm. "They will take me first because I'm so fat and juicy, and I have no bones." "Is there nothing we can do?" asked the ladybird, appealing to James. "Surely you can think of a way out of this." Suddenly, they were all looking at James. "Think," begged Miss Spider. "Think, James, think." "Come on," said the centipede. "Come on, James, there must be something we can do." Their eyes waited upon him, tense, anxious, pathetically hopeful. Chapter 20. "There is something that I believe we might try," James Henry Trotter said slowly. "I'm not saying it'll work." "Tell us!" cried the earthworm. "Tell us quick!" "We'll try anything you say," said the centipede, "but hurry, hurry, hurry." "Be quiet and let the boy speak," said the ladybird. "Go on, James." They all moved a little closer to him. There was a longish pause. "Go on," they cried frantically. "Go on." And all the time, while they were waiting, they could hear the sharks threshing around in the water below them. It was enough to make anyone frantic. "Come on, James," the ladybird said, coaxing him. I'm afraid it's no good after all," James murmured, shaking his head. "I'm terribly sorry. I forgot we don't have any string. We'd need hundreds of yards of string to make this work." "What sort of string?" asked the old green grasshopper sharply. "Any sort, just as long as it's strong." "But, my dear boy, that's exactly what we do have. We've got all you want." "How? Where?" "The silkworm," cried the old green grasshopper. "Didn't you ever notice the silkworm? She's still downstairs. She never moves. She just lies there sleeping all day long. But we can easily wake her up and make her spin." "And what about me, may I ask?" said Miss Spider. "I can spin just as well as any silkworm. What's more, I can spin patterns." "Can you make enough between you?" asked James. "As much as you want. And quickly?" Of course, of course." "And would it be strong?" "The strongest there is. It's as thick as your finger. But why? What are you going to do?" "I'm going to lift this peach clear out of the water," James announced firmly. "You're mad," cried the earthworm. "It's our only chance." "The boy's crazy. He's joking." "Go on, James," said the ladybird gently. "How are you going to do it?" "Sky hooks, I suppose," jeered the centipede. "Seagulls," answered James calmly. "The place is full of them. Look up there." They all looked up and saw a great mass of seagulls wheeling round and round in the sky. "I'm going to take a long silk string," James went on, "and I'm going to loop one end of it around a seagull's neck. And then I'm going to tie the other end to the stem of the peach." He pointed to the peach stem, which was standing up like a short, thick mast in the middle of the deck. Then I'm going to get another seagull and do the same thing again, then another and another. Ridiculous, they shouted. Absurd! Poppycock! Balderdash! Madness! And the old green grasshopper said, how can a few seagulls lift an enormous thing like this up into the air? And all of us as well? It would take hundreds, thousands. There's no shortage of seagulls, James answered. Look for yourself. We'll probably need 400, 500, 600, maybe even 1,000. I don't know. I shall simply go on hooking them up to the stem until we have enough to lift us. They'll be bound to lift us in the end. It's like balloons. You give someone enough balloons to hold, really enough, then up it goes. And a seagull has far more lifting power than a balloon. If only we have the time to do it. If we're not sunk first by those awful sharks. You're absolutely off your head, said the earthworm. How on earth do you propose to get a loop of string around a seagull's neck? I suppose you're going to fly up there yourself and catch it. The boy's dotty, said the centipede. Let him finish, said the ladybird. Go on, James, how would you do it? With bait. Bait? What sort of bait? With a worm, of course. Seagulls love worms, didn't you know that? And luckily for us, we have here the biggest, fattest, pinkest, juiciest earthworm in the world. You can stop right there, the earthworm said sharply. That's quite enough. Go on, the other said, beginning to grow interested. Go on. The seagulls have already spotted him, James continued. That's why there are so many of them circling round, but they daren't come down to get him while all the rest of us are standing here. So this is what— Stop! cried the earthworm. Stop, stop, stop! I won't have it! I refuse! I— Be quiet, said the centipede. Mind your own business. I like that. My dear earthworm, you're going to be eaten anyway, so what difference does it make whether it's sharks or seagulls? I won't do it. Why don't we hear what the plan is first, said the old green grasshopper. I don't give a hoot what the plan is, cried the earthworm. I'm not going to be pecked to death by a bunch of seagulls. You will be a martyr, said the centipede. I shall respect you for the rest of my life. So will I, said Miss Spider, and your name will be in all the newspapers. Earthworm gives life to save friends. But he won't have to give his life, James told them. Now listen to me. This is what we'll do. And I'm going to stop there and read more next.